All right, AMP1 students, this is our last video over what you need to know about the autonomic nervous system. So let me run to our last couple of objectives. So the adrenal medulla pathway, there's a lot of pathways, well, there's 4 of them that the book talks about, but we do want you to be familiar with the adrenal medulla pathway that is part of the sympathetic nervous system. And so it works just a little bit differently than what we've already described about the sympathetic nervous system. So we want to talk about that and why it works a little bit differently. And then we'll also go over, the last thing we'll talk about is the effects. So whenever the sympathetic motor neurons are sending signals to these effector organs like the cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, and glands, what effects that has on those organs. And then we'll also talk about the effects of the parasympathetic motor neurons on those same effector organs. Okay, so for the adrenal medulla pathway, first I'm going to have you look at this image again of the organization of the sympathetic nervous system. And so I want you to notice something here. First we want to locate the adrenal gland in this image. So if you remember, this was at the beginning of lab, we had you identify a lot of internal organs using the torso model. So one of those internal organs was the adrenal gland, or the adrenal glands, because there's 2 of them. And they sit on the superior pole of the kidneys. So that little yellow organ here is the adrenal gland, and this is our kidney. So if you go back here and look at our preganglionic motor neurons, you'll notice that that a lot of them will synapse in the ganglion, and they might synapse here, or they might synapse there. But you'll notice that the one that is going to go to the adrenal glands, the preganglionic motor neuron, is very, very long. So that's kind of a difference, because we said before, most of them are very short preganglionic motor neurons. But in this case, the one preganglionic motor neuron that's going to take innervation or nerve impulses to the adrenal gland is relatively long. And you'll notice that we don't have the green are representing our postganglionic motor neurons. We don't have a green postganglionic motor neuron. So our preganglionic motor neuron of our sympathetic system is going directly to that adrenal gland to stimulate it. So that is the adrenal, they call it the adrenal medulla. So this is the adrenal gland. There's 2 parts to the adrenal gland. There's a internal area called the adrenal medulla, and then there's an area on the outside, kind of on the periphery, called the adrenal cortex. And so the cells in the cortex do something different, produce different things than the cells in the medulla. So that's why we distinguish between those 2 areas of the adrenal gland, and we'll do that with other organs too when we get to them. So this is actually going to the adrenal medulla, so that's why they call this the adrenal medulla pathway, because that preganglionic motor neuron is going to communicate, so release neurotransmitters, so it's going to be acetylcholine that gets released there, but it's not going to communicate with a postganglionic motor neuron like all the others do. It's going to communicate with cells in the adrenal medulla. Okay, so those little cells in the adrenal medulla, those are cells that are part of the nervous system and part of the endocrine system. So they're part of the nervous system because they're able to, they have receptors for neurotransmitters, so they can be stimulated by the sympathetic preganglionic neuron. But then they're a cell of the endocrine system, which is the system where glands produce hormones, because once they're stimulated, they will release their produced hormones. And so a lot of times the textbook calls them neurosecretory cells, since it's the nervous system that is stimulating them, and they're going to secrete, which means release, the hormones. So the preganglionic neurons of the sympathetic nervous system are going to release acetylcholine, and that will bind to the receptors on the neurosecretory cells of the adrenal medulla, and that was going to stimulate them to release their hormones. And there's two hormones that the adrenal medulla cells will release. So epinephrine is one, and then norepinephrine is the other one. So remember, norepinephrine we already talked about. It was a neurotransmitter that was part of the sympathetic postganglionic motor neurons. But it is also can serve as a hormone. So it's going to be released from the adrenal medulla cells, as well as epinephrine, which commonly we'll call that adrenaline. And so those two will be released. And what's significant about the sympathetic system stimulating and causing the release of these two hormones from the adrenal gland is that they will get into the bloodstream. That's what hormones do. They get into the bloodstream, and then the blood can carry them to all the various tissues, organs of the body. And since norepinephrine is the one of the hormones, it will bind just like it'll bind to effector organs, receptors on effector organs, just like the norepinephrine does from the postganglionic motor neurons. But what it'll do, those hormones will stay in the blood for a longer period of time, so you'll get like prolonged effects. So instead of just like, a couple of minutes of stimulation of effector organs via the postganglionic sympathetic motor neurons, you'll get like hours of effects. So it prolongs the effects. So an example, which you probably have had this, most people have experienced this, you have a scary situation happen. So maybe it's like a car accident where you don't get really hurt, but you had that sympathetic excitement kick in, or any sort of like close call, and you'll notice that like even after the event is over, that stressful event, you still, like your heart's still really beating very fast, and you're breathing heavier and kind of jittery and stuff. So that's more of the hormones that release from the adrenal medulla. There's calling those kind of prolonged effects that last beyond long after the event has happened. So it takes a little time for those hormones to be broken down and stop stimulating your cardiac muscle in your heart or your smooth muscle in your lungs. So, all right. So that is usually a good thing, kind of keeps you on the alert for longer. But it can be a bad thing too if you're kind of under constant stress, which can sometimes happen around this time of year with the end of a semester and final exams and things. But that can cause your body to not kind of be under that constant stress for long periods of time, can prevent your body from resting and can drag you down and make you more prone to getting sick and things like that. So it's good to have good stress coping devices for stress in your life to kind of prevent that. Okay, so that is the adrenal medulla pathway that's linked with our sympathetic motor neurons, the postganglionic ones. So how that works in the body. And then the last thing that we'll talk about is the effects. So we kind of mentioned this just a little bit ago, the sympathetic division or fight or flight. Generally, whenever we're in a situation where we're scared, we're exercising, stressed out, something like that, what will happen is our sympathetic motor neurons will be sending more nerve impulses to our effector organs, so to our heart, to our lungs, to our pupils, to our cells of the body. And so this is the fight or flight thing. So it's kind of getting us prepared for action. So all this stuff probably makes sense. Usually this is logical. So if we're in a situation where we need some action, our heart rate's going to increase, and our respiratory rate will also increase. Blood pressure will increase. This is the time where we don't want to digest food at this time. We kind of want to, that takes some blood. We need like blood flow to increase to our digestive system for proper digestion. And if we're in a state where we're stressed or exercising, we don't want to be, kind of digesting food can be something that can wait till later. It's not like a something you need to take care of now. So, and we want that blood to be diverted to our skeletal muscles and things like that. So, so we don't have much activity, at least it's slowed down in the digestive system. Any sort of nutrients that might be stored, they give an example of glycogen, will be broken down into glucose, so we can use that, our cells can use that for more energy. Our airways will open up, so there's smooth muscle that surrounds or the walls of our bronchi, and it relaxes, and then our airways will dilate. It means their diameter gets larger, so that way we can get more air into our lungs, get more oxygen into our body, so we can make more energy. Usually we don't want to be going to the bathroom at that time either, so it generally will inhibit urination and defecation. We usually will have more sweat gland activity, because generally our skeletal muscles are contracting a lot in those situations, so we'll want to be able to release heat. Pupils dilate, and that's primarily so we can see more around us, to be more on the alert. And then if we have, again, we store fats and lipids in the adipose tissue, so breakdown of the adipose tissue would release lipids and fats, more nutrients that we can use for energy source too. So that's the sympathetic division effects. And then the parasympathetic division effects, when we're not in a situation where we're exercising or stressed or scared or something, we're just like kind of, usually it's when we're in a familiar surrounding and we're, not doing any work, just kind of relaxing. Then kind of the opposite happens. Our heart rate goes down, our blood pressure goes down, our respiratory rate goes down. We'll get more blood flow going to our digestive system. That's a good time to start breaking down nutrients, have proper digestion going on. If we need to go to the bathroom, it's usually when we have to go to the bathroom. And then we'll be doing that whole conserving energy and conserving or storing nutrients during that time. And again, just kind of, preparing for the next time we have a fight or flight situation. Pupils constrict during that time. We don't really need to be as alert and see everything around us. Airways will get a little bit more narrow. We don't need them as dilated or as increased in diameter, because we don't need as much air coming in. So that is our effects. So that ends our videos on the autonomic nervous system. So there's a lot more information about it, but hopefully this gives you an overview that will help you understand it. And again, realize that all that we've talked about this semester in A&P1 will be things that you'll use as you go on to A&P2 as well. So you'll start incorporating these systems we've learned about into the other systems that you'll learn about in A&P2. All right, so I will see you later.